Hello everybody, welcome back to the Rugby Bunker. Apologies for the slightly later video this week. Charlie, it's England's schedule, man. It's just messed up everything. There was no Tuesday episode. I apologise, but I promise we'll make it up to everybody because we're going to have episodes Thursday, potentially one on Friday, and then we're stuck together this weekend, aren't we? We're going to be at both Wales, New Zealand, and England against Argentina. So, you know, we're treating people in a way, aren't we?
In a way, not sure at all to be stuck with you for two games. It's going to be fantastic. No, we're creatures of routine, certainly in international windows. We get used to the schedule of team announcement Tuesday, before that media on the Thursday after that, and the Sunday game just throws you all off kilter and we become unanchored messes, don't we? But we're clawing it back towards the middle of the week, just in time for the games.
You're saying creatures of routine. I'm going to say basic. As a way to kind of sum us up, we just thrive off a very simple pattern. So it's Wednesday night when we're doing this. I went to Pennyhill Park earlier today to hear from Steve Borthwick and Elliot Daly about the team for this week. So that feels, Charlie, like the best place to start. What are your general thoughts on it as we kick off this episode?
I think there's a few things. I think we know how much Steve Borthwick's coaching career as a head coach certainly has seen him really covet experience. So lean on experienced heads, whether that was kind of overseeing a bit of a renaissance for Dan Cole at Leicester Tigers, for example, signing players like Jimmy Gopperth to kind of steward his backline. And we've seen this sort of in his England tenure as well, most kind of explicitly with the 2023 World Cup. And we all know what sort of happened there, paring down a game plan with really experienced guys involved. And this team, bringing back Elliot Daly, bringing back Henry Slade to a starting backline without either of them having any minutes in this autumn at all, with Elliot Daly not having played for 6 months at all since breaking an arm. He's been able to do a lot of conditioning, as I believe Steve spoke about, as far as how he's looked in really good nick and he's trained really well. But it's, on one hand, it's really, pushing his chips towards experience as he has done in the past, and maybe at the detriment of a little bit of dynamism. And I'm thinking of Charlie Ewell's on the bench there as well, clearly to steward the line out late on if he's needed to do that, with Theo Dan coming in for Jamie George. But then on the other hand, you've got Joe Hayes is not injured. He's rotated out, isn't he? And you've got it's not his first test start for Asher Opoku-Fitzgerald because he started against the USA in July, but it's the biggest test match start of his career. And this guy's a really young, exciting talent. So yeah, you've got two sides of it really. And on one hand, it might seem like quite a safe selection. On the other hand, it's boldly sort of developing depth. I think what it will be underpinned by, as we know for sure, is a really, really solid plan that he'll get buy-in from, because that's what happens when you keep winning, is that it breeds a confidence, it breeds a kind of clarity. And I think that's what we'll get from England on Sunday.
There's two things that he mentioned around the Elliot Daly selection in particular. Daly, it's worth pointing out, he was 24th man last week, and actually you probably spotted this as well. You could see him kind of doing all the drills in the warm-up down on the pitch. They just didn't want to use him last week because of the way he's been coming back from this arm break and building up his kind of contact minutes, I guess. But the reason that they really like Daly this week is because of his aerial game, which is so good. Like, he's excellent at both chasing after kicks and also with the way he fields kicks and how he can turn that into a counter attacking opportunity. Plus his left-footed kicking game, which was was it Eddie who used to always bang on about how much he kind of loved having Daly as an option with that left-footed kicking game, and Henry Slade as well. And I know that's something that Borthwick's mentioned too. So the combination of his left-footed kicking game, because Borthwick said in one of his quotes, as I checked my notes, he mentioned how it's meant to be a bit wet was one thing, which might lead to Argentina kicking more often, which is possible. But he also talks about how Argentina kick a lot of contestables and they like kicking the ball from left to right and sort of targeting that left wing, which I thought was quite interesting. Kind of a bit of a reveal there as to why to why they've gone with Daly for this game, Charlie.
That's Isgro, right? That's the presence of Rodrigo Isgro, the commitment that he shows in the air. He's is a real weapon, certainly with these law changes and the sort of the outlawing of the escort. He becomes a real weapon as far as generating those unstructured situations. And it's the most aerially to pick this back three whilst having Tom Roebuck and Tommy Freeman, probably two of the best recoverers of attacking high balls. That signposts that England are going to still kick a fair amount. You would have thought that those exchanges are going to be really important. I've written today that Elliot Daly in the back three gives you a real alertness in counter-attacking situations. I remember when he came into the side at the back end of the Six Nations, it was his first start against Italy. He sparks a counter-attack and he just looks like the most alert guy on the field to those situations. And I think that's what England are trying to collectively get better at, being able to strike from deep. We've seen that with George Ford's 50-22 against the All Blacks and Henry Pollock's breakout, that they are looking to sort of play off that turnover ball. And I think Elliot Daly gives them someone who's just really alert to that and a real spark for those sorts of moments in games.
I think you mentioned either in print or on one of our episodes before how you could see Daly being a really important figure for England in this autumn, but also kind of moving forward, how he could be a permanent fixture on their wings. And I think that's true based on some of the stuff that Borthwick said about Daly, not just those kind of qualities that he has as a player in the air and with the way that he can link the attack, but also I think as an experienced leader in this side. I think the highest compliment I can pay to Daly is that he's 33, but he doesn't look it. Like he still looks like a 26, 27-year-old. I think he seems to be in excellent shape post this arm fracture. And also tied into that chat about him being experienced, Borthwick mentioned how Daly is a player who he will bounce ideas off and who he'll use to get a read on information about how the squad are feeling and just to kind of bounce some ideas off. I think we can sort of forget England have so many exciting wing options at the moment, and we all want to see them get a go, whether it's Faye Raposo or Arundel or Freeman or Roebuck or Caden Murley, who apparently has been awesome in camp for England this whole autumn but hasn't seen a minute. And yet we sort of forget that actually experience and leadership, how valuable that can be. And that's, I guess what I'm saying is, don't be surprised if Daly is fully fit, if he goes on to start all 5 games for England in the Six Nations.
The suggestion of his value to Borthwick has been emphasised, I think, by the award of one of those EPS contracts. He was newly given one of them for the start of this year. Wasn't in the inaugural sort of group, was he? And then he got one off the back of the Lions tour, on which he really impressed and looked set for test involvement before he did break his arm. Yeah, you're right. I hadn't really thought about how he's been, I guess, a constant in. Certainly, I remember him in our careers, I was going to say, as journalists, but I remember him sort of emerging. I remember watching him for Whitgift School, actually, at Twickenham. And you're right, he had an outside break, he had a booming left foot off the tee, he held the ball in 2 hands going at the line and could whip passes out. He's certainly one of those players, but I think people really have. I think there's certainly a clamour to see how someone like Henry Arundel can elevate England. And that's totally understandable too, because someone like Henry Arundel has a really high ceiling, express pace, can just change games. You only need to look at Louis Bielbieri to see his impact on the France side. But I do think people have short memories as far as how impactful Daly can be. His sort of reintegration into the team in the last Six Nations sparked this winning run that England are on. Like all elite players, he has added bits to his game over the years. I felt like for the 2023 World Cup I mentioned earlier, I felt like he almost remodeled his game to become a specialist kind of kick chaser. Do you remember that tackle he made on Dwayne Vermeulen in the semi-final at a point when it seemed like England were really turning the screw? He can mould his game to the needs of a side. And you're right, I think England are building a really good blend of athleticism and experience in their pack. I think they can start to do the same with their backline too if people like Daly stick around, and they can help, as you say, these newer talents come through and impose themselves on the side too.
Yeah, mate, massively. I think that's really well put. I think in terms of to go back to the Asher Opoku-Fajor selection at tight head, that is a selection where I wonder if England had, say, lost to New Zealand and maybe lost to Australia as well, and maybe if they were feeling the heat a bit more, I wonder if that is a selection they make, purely because Borthwick spoke about his kind of conversation with Joe Hayes about the selection. He said, look, like you've played really well, but we need to make sure that we have the right kind of level of depth and experience and competition around the squad at the moment at tight head. And obviously Will Stewart is there as well, but it's almost as though things have gone so well that they feel that they can make that kind of selection at tight head. Whereas if you certainly couldn't find a reason to get rid of Joe Hayes based on his performance, because he's been playing so well, hasn't he? So I think that's a real benefit of where England are at the end of this autumn. It's sort of gone as well as they could have hoped results wise, while still leaving some gaps performance wise for them to kind of focus on and improve moving forward. Like, maybe starting well, because we're sort of three games in now, aren't we, where they haven't necessarily had a great start, have they?
Yeah, I think they'll be harsh on elements of their attack again. I thought they did start well against New Zealand, but just didn't have the points to show for it. And we said, didn't we, afterwards, that felt like in years gone by, maybe against more assured All Black sides, that could be terminal, missing that many chances early on. And I think they'll just want to get pay for the areas of their game that are clearly in very good nick. Like that, I think their defense around the ruck is exceptional. I think how they're moving from their 22 to the opposition 22, often through contestable kicks, I think that's in very good nick. I think they can demand more of themselves as far as just being slick with their ball movement and playing to space in the opposition half. Few chances just going begging, and they can be more clinical. But this is we're nitpicking now, which is what they've earned, And I think that's what I do think that there will be an element of fatigue. It's the end of a long, tough campaign. It's the end. They won't look at it like this because they're halfway through a season, but it's a chance to go through a calendar year with 11 wins from 12 games, which did not look very hopeful in Dublin, did it, at the very start of the year? But they've done extremely well as far as results. They've had some very impressive performances along the way, and just as impressively, they've developed depth. So it's been a really good campaign and a really good year in all. They'll want to finish off with a result. They'll want to finish off with a few things to really light their fire ahead, looking forward to the Six Nations too.
Yeah, I mean, to that point about depth, Henry Slade coming in as effectively, I guess, your third choice outside centre now, given the way that Ollie Lawrence has gone and the fact that England are trying Tommy Freeman at 13 and probably want to see more of him there, kind of fitness allowing. I think Steve Borthwick said, look, what a brilliant kind of option to have Slade coming in at 13 for a game like this. As we mentioned, another left-footed kicker like Daly. And so I think on what is forecast to be a wet day, I think the addition of Slade with his left foot, Spencer starting at scrum half over Mitchell for this one as well is another element to that. Just to finish off on Slade, Borthwick was asked about just Slade in general, and he really noted how good Slade was in that first test in Argentina over the summer, and how he then picked up an injury and had to fly home, and the rest of the England squad were pretty down about the fact that Slade had to leave the tour because he'd played so well in that first test with his defence and the amount of ground he covered. Borthwick also kind of slightly swerved a question about Slade's future and whether Slade would be around for the Rugby World Cup, only because he said, look, I'm always having conversations with players about that, like my door's always open kind of thing. But the reason I bring it up is Slade he's on an enhanced EPS deal this season, but he's also off contract with Exeter at the end of the season. And I've actually lost track of how old he is. How old do you reckon Slade is? I'm going to guess, is he 31? I want to say.
He's 31 or 32, isn't he?
32.
Yeah.
So he's facing a big decision. Does he stay at Exeter for another year and goes to the World Cup, or does he, as many Exeter players have done in recent years since their amazing double season a few years ago, does he take the money in France and make a move there? I mean, that's the thing that Slade has to debate, I guess. I just wonder whether it's tricky, isn't it? What do you reckon? Is he a player who could be around by Australia in 27, or may he have gone elsewhere?
Very, very interesting. He is, I think he's on record as saying that the last World Cup and him being the sort of surprise, high profile omission from the squad right at the death. I think he's on record as saying that that's going to, he wants that to serve as fuel to get to 2027. He's going to have a serious amount of competition to get there. If you think about the guys, Freeman adding to that competition at 13, we might have Joe Marchant coming. Joe Marchant is off contract at Stade Francais and potentially coming back to the Premiership. I think it will be difficult for Henry Slade to squeeze into that. I think he would be right on the border again. But by all accounts, he has trained really, really well and is a really popular member of that wider squad. In a lot of ways, this game is a reward for those players that have stuck around and helped the side prepare for games. Asher Poker-Fajor, Daly, Charlie Ewell's coming in late on the bench, Slade too. He is in a really interesting situation. And Rob Baxter's, I think, has spoken about how he's very well looked after at Exeter. I believe he's their excluded player. So, and he has been a rallying point for them. You mentioned all the Exeter players, sort of his peer group, pretty much him and Jack Yandel are the only guys that are knocking around, right? So he's been at Exeter through sort of various iterations of that side. The England stuff, it feels like he's been exceptional in the Premiership this season, hasn't he? He's looked really, really good. And it might be that he contributes to that backline sort of leadership density that they don't have a lot of. And he will be valuable in that sense. He will be right. He'll certainly be right on the line of that World Cup thinking, you'd think, but there are always injuries. Keeps himself really, really fit. That quality that you mentioned, I think, if England will get tested out, won't they, at 13 and beyond by Argentina, even if it is a bit wet, I think, and he can really reinforce his value by being really connected with his wings and really snuffing out Argentina when they go wide, as he did so well in that first test. But going to be a little bit more difficult because Argentina will have a few more players back. They'll come in with, I feel like they'll come into this fixture with feeling like very little to lose after those wins over Wales and Scotland. Yeah, England are going to get a workout. Slade's going to get a workout and a chance to kind of underline his worth.
We touched on it with the Daly and Slade and Spencer selections, but I just wanted to throw back to last week's kicking analysis, Charlie, before the England All Blacks game, where we were chatting about the number of kicks each team has done this year and kind of their peak numbers. And what was the average number of England kicks this year?
It was 35, and it was bang on 35, wasn't it?
Bang on 35. I mean, come on, absolutely sensational. When I checked the stats on Sunday night, I was delighted to see that England had delivered on the average, just as we discussed in the previous episode.
35 with Ben Earls kicking to touch at the end of the game. It's quite amusing, that.
Was it actually? Maybe he had a message from up top and he thought, well, we can't fall below. In a game where Ben and Charlie have said that we might hit our most kicks all year, we can't fall short of the average. And Ben, I respect that massively. Well done. Are there any other thoughts you've got, Charlie, about the All Blacks game that we didn't get a chance to chat about post-match?
I just think, sort of watching it back, I think they, as I said, they will feel as though maybe they left a couple of tries at least out there. That was sort of our original inkling, wasn't it? But I think watching it back reinforced that. The game got sticky because New Zealand hung in, because of that Ben Earl yellow card. But I just feel that if they'd been a little bit more clinical, England, with that early pressure, I think that's what they can really challenge themselves on. And that's what, throughout the Six Nations, that they've tended to finish campaigns quite well under Steve Borthwick. If I'm thinking recently, if I think back to the Six Nations, they finished the Six Nations strongly by thrashing Wales, when a lot of stuff, I know Wales was sort of they are at a low ebb still, but England sort of, a lot clicked for England. And I feel like certainly if a bit more can click in an attacking sense this weekend, I think they will feel like they're in a really good space ahead of the Six Nations, and they'll be able to finish the year on a high note. But as I say, they're going to be tested for sure, because Argentina have a hell of a lot of athleticism, a lot of speed. Chocobares is the world's form inside centre, certainly right in there in the conversation. Probably might depend where you how you categorise Andre Esterhuizen, but yeah, they're full of massive talents, and it's going to be a really interesting one.
I like how you just appeased any South Africans there, just to make sure that you've covered yourself. Just to, I respect that. I appreciate we haven't spoken too much about Argentina, but the reason for that is I'm hoping that there will be a little bonus episode where I'll be chatting to Ramiro Conti, who works for ESPN in Argentina and who is over here following the Pumas around. So you'll get a bit more in depth from Argentina then. But yeah, Charlie, I think going into this, I can see why England are favourites. I think that's very deserved. I feel like the selection is good. I like that they've kept the kind of back row, second row combo together. I think that's smart. And yeah, very interested to see what we get out of Daly and Slade. Yeah. Any final thoughts?
I just think it feels like in a funny sort of way, despite what they've done this year, it does feel important for England to finish strong and to get that result. And maybe that's a little bit of the reflection of that's reflected, a little bit in the selection, with a result just feeling important to maintain impetus a little bit for England.
I just realised we didn't chat about Freddie Stewart, and I was just looking for the kind of notes that we had about how he's available. So essentially, he went off with that very early HIA, didn't he, Stewart, having made a pretty positive start, and so he failed his HIA 1, then he passed his HIA 2 and his HIA 3. So HIA 2 is the next morning, I think, and then HIA 3, I can't remember if that's 48 hours or 72 hours, but basically he failed on the day, but he's good to go. That's why he's back at fullback. Yeah.
It's the same sort of situation as Johnny Sexton in New Zealand, right? A couple of years ago. HIA 1s are extremely hard to pass, which is, quite kind of reassuring, I guess, if you've got a player welfare hat on. But yeah, sometimes they can be failed without a concussive incident having happened. So that's why the process is a bit thorough, and that's why it goes into those second days.
Is that your player welfare hat that you're wearing right now?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear. Right, let's have a little break, Charlie, and then we can dive into the many, many other games taking place this weekend. Charlie, let's start, because we're both going to be there, with Wales against New Zealand. Because I am a sicko and I'm fascinated by this stuff, I've checked the handicap, and hopefully you haven't read it in the scripts. Have you read it in the scripts? Do you know what it is? Oh, it's disappointing. Handicap's 29. I feel like 29 is a little bit low, personally. But listen,
it's kind of a reflection of Wales are that I think a 29-point loss they might take. At the minute, I know Duff Jenkins has sort of said, look, we're absolutely not. I think his quote was, if you're a pro athlete, you think you win in every contest, and they've got to have that frame of mind for sure. And they've got to be confident. They've got to be combative when they play this game. But that sort of result would absolutely be expected, I think, at this stage. If they can get closer than that, if they can get sort of a 10-point gap, that's a big win, I think. Then they're gonna fight hard. It's gonna be interesting to see how they go about it, because this week and next week against the Springboks, as we've said, for that game, Wales will be without Premiership players and top 14 players. That is real tricky.
I mean, I'll double down on that happily. If Wales get within 29 points, I think that's massive. I think that's incredible, progress from where they potentially were back at the end of the Six Nations and the start of this autumn. I think that would be a real achievement. I think that has to be the aim for this New Zealand game and for South Africa next week. I think I've said this before, and I wrote it in a piece for the Observer just on where Wales are at on and off the field, which is a whole separate issue. So I'd obviously implore you to go and read that article. But I think, yeah, if they can keep New Zealand and South Africa to 40 or under. That's mega. I would be all over that. I was not surprised, Charlie, when I watched the Wales Japan game back and I dug into the stats to see Ollie Cracknell topping the tackle count on 23 against Japan. I think we've touched on this already, that he's a player that we both rate really highly, and I think he will give, in this age for Wales where you're just trying to build kind of character and toughness and a bit of fortitude and a bit of a spine, someone like Cracknell is perfect, isn't he, for that?
Yeah, I've been really impressed by him since started watching him regularly, really, and that'd be since he sort of joined the Prem. Yeah, you're right as far as he just seems suited to the Test game, because he wins a lot of collisions, to put it really bluntly, and that'll be on either side of the ball. Yeah, he's a powerful guy, sort of stocky-ish in build, and he works really, really hard with it. And sometimes those really uncomplicated things, if you do those things accurately, you're extremely valuable.
Yeah, and it feels like I wrote this in the article. It's great for Wales having Reece Zammit back, and I think he's perfect in terms of he will be a star attraction and he will score lots of great tries. But you need everything else to kind of function to a high enough level to get the best out of him and for him to produce those moments, unless they're completely out of nothing. And so if they can just work on having the foundations in place for quick ruck ball and for their set piece to be competitive, I think that's kind of massive as well. If I think about the New Zealand side of things, Roygaard is massive, isn't he? Like I think he might be their most important player or most valuable player at the moment, because he has emerged as such a good kind of game manager with those moments of individual brilliance as well. So I guess that's something to watch, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people that watch the All Blacks week to week now would say that that Roygaard has become the most one of, if not probably slightly behind Surveyor as far as their most important player, and a huge loss that I would be Beauden Barrett's in a very bad way. And if he's not, if one of your key playmakers is struggling to punt the ball from a standing position, I think that sort of says a lot for what sort of pain he's in, how compromised he is. It would be a big surprise to see him.
Yeah, it feels like a pretty obvious tell, doesn't it, if a player isn't functioning at full quality. I wonder what they do, because it's their last test of the year. I wonder if do you rotate heavily and try and give the guys on tour a chance who haven't played much, or do you go full strength to end on a massive, or best available to end on a massive high? I don't actually. I mean, we're recording this Wednesday night, so we don't know, but I'm intrigued to see what they go for there.
I think mentality-wise, unfortunately for Wales, it's a chance for New Zealand to sort of underline how they don't feel like they're miles off. And in a lot of, I know they've been absolutely whacked. They've lost to Argentina in Buenos Aires. They've been whacked in Wellington by the Springboks by a record margin. And then they've lost to England. And those three things sort of combined can feel like, certainly the sort of mood music coming out of New Zealand is very somber, isn't it? And it's very almost existential crisis time for the coaching staff and a lot of the senior players. I just wonder whether their mentality this week will be, we know we're not that far off, and we can sort of underline that today against Wales. Otherwise they don't have that much to gain from this fixture because of the low ebb that Wales are at. So I think their messaging will be to be ruthless, and that's how they can sign off their year on a high.
4 more tries for Will Jordan to tie that record. I'm just going to throw it out there.
You called that early.
Again, you
called it early,
just so they're aware, just so people know. Ireland South Africa follows Wales New Zealand. Obviously, the game of the weekend. South Africa going for a first win in Dublin since 2012. They got mighty close in 2022, didn't they? That 1916 classic, which was just one of the, Justin Colby spoke about it this week, just one of the most incredibly physical tests, like a real kind of exhibition of kicking and physicality. That was an outstanding game. I sort of feel better about Ireland after that win against Australia, even though Australia completely just seemed in disarray with how to manage the conditions, and Ireland and Sam Prendergast kind of pounced on that, didn't they? I think we're looking at, Murray Kinsella has written in the 42 that Ireland are probably going to have Sam Prendergast and Bundy Aki and Josh van der Fleer and Andrew Porter all starting. I think that probably leaves Ireland in a better shape than maybe earlier in the autumn. What's your thinking about Ireland at the moment?
Been round the houses, as I guess a lot of people have, and I think it would just be. I agree with you. After that Australia wins, it felt like they connected a few areas of their game quite pleasingly. You know, they won more of the kicking battles, and they played nicely off those. They played nicely when they had chances to. How funny would it be if the year ends up with Sam Prendergast beating the world champions with a really assured performance? That would be a roller coaster of a year that has started hot, run hot, come cool, seen him out of the side again, and then finished hot again. So yeah, it's and that just is fickle. It's fickle when you're growing up in one of those decision-making positions and you're thrust to the sort of highest level as quickly as he has. I think we love these. And this week, I guess, what's kind of the sort of long-awaited launch of the Nations Championship and which is sort of being introduced so that there can be more jeopardy around these games in these windows in the November and the July, when these games have jeopardy on their own, don't they? Because South Africa lose and there's just a little question mark, and maybe you're thinking back to among the things that they've achieved this year, you'll be thinking back to sort of the wobbles. So the loss to Australia, the fact that they couldn't get it done at Eden Park, and they have been sticky in some games. If they win there, I just feel like they sort of, I think they're here already, but they reinforce the fact that they're sort of out on their own at the minute. And you talk about England being in a good position. South Africa they have built up the goodwill that they can rotate regardless of the result the previous week. And they've done that a few times. And now look at them. They have multiple options in every position. They are throwing so many headaches at opposition as far as how they're going to play and the variety that they can impart on a game. But Ireland, on the other hand, can rescue a bit of emphasis themselves, which had seemed like it was ebbing away a little bit over the course of, because what I think about their year, I think about France getting up in Dublin and being really good value for that. And I think about the Chicago game, them just not firing too many shots in that game, if that's not too unfair. But a win here would change that perception, I think. And certainly for a selfish point of view, as somebody who's going to cover the Six Nations, I think it would be a lot of fun to have Ireland buoyant going into that tournament.
You're right. It falls at the perfect time, I think, this fixture for Ireland, in terms of Chicago. Yeah, they didn't play as well as we know they can do. The Japan game was pretty sluggish, and the second half sort of saved it in a way, but they weren't great. It feels like now they've had that big win over Australia, there's sort of no excuses in terms of rust or combinations, that everything should be clicking, and maybe they've got the bad stuff, the bad kind of performances out of their system. And to your point on South Africa, yeah, I mean, they're running out of things to achieve, which is probably the highest praise you can give a team, isn't it? Like, I think if they win in Dublin, essentially the only thing that has eluded them this year or recently is going to be winning at Eden Park, and they won't get another shot to do that until 2020. I don't know. I'm not even sure now, because I've lost track with the way the tours play out. Would it be 27? Would they get? There's a full rugby championship in 27?
How often are the greatest rivalry series?
Well, they're every 4 years.
Going to South Africa for every 4. So it might be 2030 then, right?
Do you reckon for that rugby championship in 2027, which I think is going to be a full rugby championship, do you reckon New Zealand rugby will be like, nah, let's not play that at Eden Park?
They won't want to go back. They won't want to go back to Wellington.
No, Wellington scrub. Do it in Dunedin. Just do it in front of the zoo. That's going to be the next objective, I think. But yeah, my point being, they're running out of stuff to win. But if Ireland win, that would, like you say, that would give you, it would kind of ruin this perception that maybe they are fading and that they're past their peak. It would alter our perceptions on Ireland massively. So yeah, I can't wait for that game. To quickly hit on the others that are taking place, France Australia is late on Saturday night, I feel like France. I saw the highlights of the France-Fiji game. Like that was not a smooth experience whatsoever. Off the back of the way they faded so badly against South Africa in the second half in Paris, despite the advantage. Oh, should have mentioned that Franco Mostart's red card was rescinded, and I think we're both in agreement that it was never a red card in the first place. We got there in the end, but the whole kind of three officials thinking it might be yellow, a TMO then going, I think you should have another look at this angle, it getting upgraded, it then getting rescinded because there was clearly contact not with the head first. A bit of a mess. And I'm glad that we've got to the right point there. To go back to what I was saying, yeah, I feel like France are due complete performance, like a real kind of statement performance, and Australia. It's a new week, Charlie, so Australia have got a new fly half from the sounds of things because James O'Connor's been the fall guy for the Dublin loss. But yeah, I wonder if Australia might run into a bit of trouble here because they've really struggled on this European tour.
Yeah, they look weary. They look like they are crawling to the end of quite an emotionally draining year. And you're right, I think they are running into a France side who will be really eager to sort of put a full stop on their November campaign. And yeah, as with the other Six Nations sides, finish strongly going into that tournament. So it looks tricky for the Wallabies.
You can put Scotland in the same bracket as France after that just total disaster against Argentina. I think they will also want to kind of take Tonga to the cleaners a little bit. Alternatively, if you've got memories of Tonga beating Scotland back in, I want to say 2011, was it? You can get Tonga at 66-1 to win this weekend. Food for thought. Final games, Charlie. There's three that I just wanted to mention, which we won't dive into doing massive previews, but I will be having half an eye on. Italy against Chile on Saturday night. Love that. Spain against Fiji in Malaga. Quite like the idea. If I was told by somebody that I had to go cover Spain against Fiji in Malaga, fine. I wouldn't say no. And last but not least, Georgia against Japan. I wonder how Eddie is feeling about sending his Japan team to Tbilisi.
They're super close in the. This is 11th against 13th, right, in the world ranking. So yeah, it feels quite important for Georgia to get up themselves, especially at home. But it's the end of a tough tour for Japan, and they're I guess they'll be buoyant in a lot of ways from good aspects of that Wales game. So yeah, a really interesting one.
Last but not least, Charlie, congratulations to Samoa for just about qualifying as the 24th team for the Rugby World Cup. I know you had an eye on that. What did you make of their 13-all draw with Belgium?
I mean, the story was Belgium, really. They were just collectively so committed, really intelligent with the way they defended. It was a big rope-a-dope of a game. They spent a lot of time without the ball, and Samoa just couldn't click at all. They had to wait until I think they scored through Abraham Papali'i in the 64th minute, and that was a real heartbreaker for Belgium because all Samoa had to do because of how the tournament worked out was to draw because they'd got one more bonus point. But they really didn't play well. I think McFarlane was quite funny afterwards, sort of just said, yeah, well, we've got a ticket to the World Cup and we're going to have to be a lot better. Better start. And then the Jean-Maurice Diclebe, I've probably gaffed that, but that's Belgium captain who was really good on the floor, really sort of disruptive at the breakdown. So he was one of the sort of stars of the performance. And he sort of signed off by saying, we will be determined to get to 2031. And it was a really fun one to watch. It was good to see a game with massive jeopardy, good to see an underdog hanging really, really tough. And you really felt for them at the end of it. But Samoa landing I think it's their 10th out of, I think they've only ever missed the 98-87, though, the inaugural World Cup. So it would have felt a bit weird without them, certainly in a 2014 tournament. They're going to be there, and you'd imagine saw Sean Stevenson pondering a sort of declaring himself available. Tuilagi might come into that reckoning as well. So you'd think that they'd arrive at the World Cup with the two guys that they had from the Premiership recently sort of shifted eligibility to them, Titi Lamasitelli and Scott Seo. So yeah, they'll have some good players for sure when they get to that tournament.
Oh, I'd love to see Manu playing for Samoa and keeping the Tuilagi kind of legacy going. That'd be awesome. Charlie, we've done it, mate. We've reached the end. We've got 6 hours, maybe 7 hours in the car together on Saturday. So what snacks are you bringing?
Well, I actually have some gourmet ones from M&S that were very kindly, shout out to my brother, sent over as a gift. So they can come for sure. Maybe sort of on the way back, they're probably they're a bit luxurious for the way up, I would say.
Yes, if you're listening, that was a free plug. So just get in touch via the email on the contact page. I reckon I'll allow you to choose one album for each leg of the journey, so you can mull over that as well and come up with some options there.
Lovely. It's going to be. Well, you really should be educating me on this. So I think that can be your role, as well as driving,
as well as safely ensuring you get to Cardiff and back. Okay, I'll take on that responsibility. Listen, what a pleasure. Thank you so much, listeners and viewers. Sorry that we're slightly later this week, but I promise we will make up with it with a load of content over the next few days. But yeah, thanks so much. See you in a bit.